So let me introduce today's speaker, Graham White. Graham, as many already know, it's a very well respected and experienced Dharma and meditation teachers. And Graham has been supporting the association for many, many years, has been teaching our community for many, many years. So even though some of you already know who Graham White is, but I still would like to read out some of the brief introduction in case if somebody who doesn't know him, because this is in recording, right? Okay, so now Graham began his study in England in the late 60s, and he was later ordained as a Thai Buddhist monk. And his training also includes many visits to Burma over the last 30 years to continue his own studies and meditate with his own master. So Graham has been teaching meditation for the past 15 years in Australia, California, and Hawaii. So Graham has been a regular guest speaker at the Buddhist Library here and in many other centers in Sydney. And he's a founding member of the Blue Mountains Insight Meditation Center and Metlobah. So today, Graham will be touching on the awakening factors to come out of suffering, which I'm very eager to learn as well. So without further ado, let us pay respect to the Triple Gem as well as our teachers today.
Good evening, everyone. It seems only a short time since I was here 2 weeks ago, I think, where we did a 4-week course and back at the library again. So it's very nice to come at the invitation of the Association of Engaged Buddhists and to share some Dharma with you, some meditation time with you. And I think that's a really important factor as the community of Dharma practitioners, don't you? You know, and good to come sit together and to, listen a little to the Buddha's teachings, but especially to sit together, which we will do tonight as well. I'd like to say hello to the people that have joining us on Zoom. I don't know how many of you are there.
There's 8 at the moment.
8 at the moment, so welcome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Usually when I do Zooming things, I like that I can see everybody's, but I can't see you, but I know you're there. So, so I thought we'd have a quite informal night tonight. It's been quite a long week. And I'd like to do a little sitting practice together, which is obviously the most important part of the Buddha's teachings. You know, we have to discover and cultivate in ourselves how to have a happy mind. And is it possible to have a happy mind? Is it possible to come out of that which causes suffering in the mind and have a happy mind? This is the teaching. Often people will think about the Buddhism as they often say, non-Buddhists Buddhists will say that this Buddhist practice is like a pessimistic practice, always talking about suffering, etc., etc. The main topic of conversation is always around dukkha. And of course, we can see that surrounding us day by day. Moment to moment, dukkha is there. But the Buddha's path is not one of pessimism, it's one of realism. And it opens up the mind to understanding accepting in the mind that this is the nature of the human condition, that there is going to be dukkha, there's going to be COVID, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. All of these things are part and parcel of having a mind and having a body. And I think this is the real core teachings of the Buddha, is to understand this. And when the Buddha thought about this, I guess, he wanted to find a path that would lead to a happy mind, to a liberated mind. Still being able to live in the world, but with understanding of how the world actually is in reality. Not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, but seeing it as it is. The difference in how the Buddha perceived this, I guess, is that he perceived it as that this is the reality of things. This is how things actually are, right? But he practiced and he spent quite a long period of time, as you all know, if you know the life of the Buddha, practicing concentration meditation, and then finally on his enlightenment night, opening up to vipassana practice, which leads to the awakened mind, the understanding mind. And this brought happiness to the mind. So the mind can be happy, but still have understanding and still be able to live in the world with the realistic view of the world, of how it actually is. I mean, it's always going to be birth, old age, sickness, and death. All of us are getting to, not you, of course, but a similar age. And, we're starting to feel the trials of having a physical body which is not doing as it used to do. And I say this with some respect. When I'm a surfer as well as a meditator, I like riding surfboards, and which is my biggest craving, I think. But now I'm 74 and I've had 2 knee operations, and the main topic of conversation amongst my friends down at the beach is how's the hips? How's the knees? How's this? How's that? No one talks about, can you still get up on your surfboard? Fortunately enough, most of my friends are quite friendly, and it's always said with a laugh, and this is how it actually is. And so the reality is that there's going to be degeneration. And every moment, of course, there's the fading away of the powers that we used to have in our youth, isn't it? So this is part of dukkha as well. And then we get hit with the COVID, and we get hit with this, and then we get hit with that. And it's all to do with, as the Buddha was pointing out, around dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of things, really. And in the teaching of the Buddha, what he was interested in was finding a liberated mind that understood this. And it's not often mentioned, but I think this is an important factor. He wanted to get off the cycle altogether, out of samsara, if you like. And he did achieve that with his parinibbana. And so he wasn't caught up with this endless cycle of birth, death, etc., etc. But it seemed to be that while he was in the world, because of his awakened mind, he had a happy mind. He was surrounded by the same things that we're surrounded with. Even 2,600 years ago, there was plagues, there was disease, there was backbiting, there was gossip. People were trying to kill the Buddha, this sort of thing. But the Buddha remained with a happy mind through all of this. And then he was able to teach a path that was going to allow us also to have a happy mind with all of this going on around us. And that's important, don't you think? You find these days, especially with COVID striking so many people down, but also just normal everyday people are becoming depressed and anxious and filled with anxiety, because they're insecure. The Buddha said life is insecure. And we think it's secure, but it's not, because everything is what? It's changing from moment to moment, changing. And this is the teaching that we need to really understand, that nothing is going to stay the same. That's for sure. Our lives have changed radically, haven't they, in the last 18 months? Not only because of growing older, but our normal lives that we used to live are not there anymore, and to a big degree. And people are suffering because of this. You're not able to see their friends, not able to travel or do the things that they like to do. This is dukkha as well. But in all of this, if we follow the path of the Buddha and practice diligently, then we can maintain and cultivate and increase a happy mind in these difficult situations. The mind can be okay going through all the ups and downs of life. And he laid out a path that was useful for us. And he laid out a path. The heart of the Buddha's teachings is based around these 37 factors of enlightenment, or he called it the wings of awakening. And they're qualities of mind that can be cultivated and can be developed and can be enhanced on to create the conditions for happiness to arise in the mind. So when I talk about, often people talk about Buddhism as a pessimistic religion, if you like. It's not actually a religion, it's an art of living. And how do I want to put this? If we continue with our practice and have a commitment to our practice, then you will start to notice the happiness of the meditation and the art of living coming up in the mind. And so we can be in the world with a happy mind. And the Buddha laid out a path called the 37 Factors of Enlightenment, or the Wings of Awakening, that we can follow, that we can try in a positive way to develop. And that's what I'd like to talk. It's a very long topic. I'm just going to mention it briefly tonight, so you get a feel for the training that's required, to reach this point where the mind is naturally happy. Not happy because it's got something we want, but happy in a natural way. And so I think that the path of the Buddha, that the Buddha talked, and the result of the path is one of developing a natural happiness in the mind. The mind becomes happy. But it's different than seeing a good movie, having a good dinner, like having a good surf, if you like, or whatever your interest happens to be. It's different than that kind of happiness, because that kind of happiness is very temporary, only lasts for a few moments, really, when you think about it. But happiness that's more sustainable in the mind. There's a lot of talk about sustainability now, isn't there? And the Buddha's path, I think, is a path of sustainability, that can allow this happiness to come into the mind. But a different kind of happiness than the happiness of seeking after the sense door happiness all the time. And so for me, the path of the Buddha is one of joy. And I remember practicing in Burma and in Thailand. And when I began to practice myself in England, but a lot of the yogis there, the Burmese people especially, I think, around the world, even with all the troubles that the Burmese are having at the moment, all their meditation centers are closed, the temples are closed, the government's shooting them, dukkha again. But the Burmese people in general, the ordinary Burmese people, are very into meditation. There are thousands of meditation centers in Burma. I won't say thousands, but there's a lot. And the Burmese people go there to meditate. It's like what's the word? I can't think of the word at the moment. Yeah, it's a mecca for meditation, if you like. And I used to love going into the meditation halls there. And there'd be anything from 100, 200, 300 people sitting, practicing. And it was just inspiring to be there. I feel so compassionate for them now because of all the troubles they're having at the moment. They're all closed down and they can't go. And I think of all the cultures, all the peoples in the world, it was the Burmese that really utilized and dedicated themselves to meditation practice and to the qualities of sila, samadhi, and panya, the Buddha's teachings. I noticed when I was practicing in Burma, the generosity of the Burmese people towards us as we were practicing was extraordinary. Always offering something. Oh, you've come to meditate. They were so happy that you came to meditate. We were conditioned for them to be happy. We gave them the opportunity to practice generosity. And they were so grateful for that. Now they're not having the opportunity. And so the mind is dropping a little bit in Burma. They're not getting the opportunities to practice sila, to practice generosity, to practice samadhi and vipassana. So that to me is a very sad situation. We have the opportunity now for a long time. We couldn't do face-to-face classes. It was all on Zoom, which I didn't want to do to begin with. But I started doing the Zoom classes and I really started to enjoy them. So you Zoomies out there, I'm enjoying you being there. I was reluctant to start. I said, how can you teach like that? But I found that it was possible. As long as I could see the people, which is why I want to see you, then I'm fine with it. Because it brought the community together. And some of these Zoom classes, people, my students were coming in from Hawaii and California and Australia. And it was just great to see everybody, and have that feeling of community in Dharma. And the thing I learned, I think the most in Burma was the community aspect of meditation practice. It's often said, one has to go off into the forest alone and practice. Well, that's not the case. I think it's one way. But since the great teacher Mahasi Sayadaw and a number of other teachers in the 50s or so in Burma started bringing this vipassana practice out to the West, to the ordinary everyday people, it changed completely. And people don't go off to the forest anymore, to be alone. They practice in our community. And I found, as I mentioned earlier, how wonderful that was to sit in a hall of people, all trying to brighten the mind and bring more understanding into the mind. It was inspiring and helpful to do this. So either on Zoom or on face-to-face. I think the last 4-week course was the first face-to-face that had been held at the Buddhist Library. And it was wonderful to be back doing face-to-face as well. So the purpose of us practicing this Buddha's teachings, if you like, is it's very clear. The Buddha gave a very clear purpose. He said, we need to get rid of the kilesas in the mind, that which disturbs the mind, the negative mental states of greed, ill will, etc., anger, frustration, all of these things that cause us suffering. We need to get rid of in the mind. And they use the term get rid of and remove. Some of the Burmese teachers, they use, I think they've been actually watching too much TV, although they probably don't watch TV. They say we need to exterminate the defilements in the mind, the kilesa in the mind, greed, hatred, delusion, etc., etc. And we need to cultivate the conditions for happiness to arise in the mind. The conditions for happiness to arise in the mind. And these 37 factors of enlightenment, which I'll talk about after we've meditated for a little bit, are the conditions we need to cultivate. So all of the law of the Buddha's teaching, the law of the Dhamma, is concerned with causes and conditions. Causes and conditions. We can either create conditions which are going to bring us this happy mind I talk about, or it can bring us devastation in the mind if the causes are not correct, if you like, and the conditions don't arise from that cause. That are going to bring happiness into the mind. So our job as Buddhists and as meditators is to create conditions in the mind which are going to allow this natural happiness to arise in the mind. Do you understand this? Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do by following the advice given by the Buddha, which he discovered for himself and passed on to us, luckily for us. So anyway, that's a little prelude to the 37 factors of enlightenment and why they're so important for us to follow. Not spoken about a lot, usually, but I think I'd just like to sort of briefly go over some of them for you so you'll get a feel for them. How does that sound? So we'll do that, but we might meditate for a little while. But before we do, the last 4-week course, a friend in Hawaii sent me this little story from Ajahn Chah. Some of you will know who Ajahn Chah is. Yeah, very famous Buddhist meditation teacher who died some years ago now. And many people have benefited from his wonderful teachings. And I was fortunate enough, I guess, or very fortunate indeed, when I was a young monk, which was many years ago now, to have spent 2 weeks at the foreign yogi meditation center that had been started by Ajahn Sumedho. And Ajahn Chah came to the center for a couple of times while I was there. So that was really beautiful, watching him walk around and watching him and listening to his talks. And he always spoke, which I really like about the Thai teaching. He spoke a lot in story form, always telling stories, but they seem simple on the surface, but not simple at all when you look into the story that he was telling you. He would use story to give a feel for the Dhamma. And I think it was a great way of teaching. He was a very remarkable person, Ajahn Chah, I think. Today I'm going to retell an old story. Please sit comfortably and I will begin. That's how he always used to say, like something like that. He'd start in this way. So he wanted to relax the audience, so their minds were not tight. He was into relaxing people and opening up the mind to listen to his Dhamma and to understand the Dhamma. Once upon a time, a little monkey left his home on the big mountain and descended into the valley. He came to a cornfield. There were so many large ears of corn all around him that he became hungry. He picked an armful and walked away. Not long after, he came to a peach tree laden with big, red, juicy peaches. He threw down the corn and picked 2 peaches. They were so big that he had to hold one in each hand. As he walked along with the peaches, he caught sight of a watermelon field. Seeing how much bigger the watermelons were than the peaches, he threw down the peaches and ran into the field. Suddenly, he saw a small rabbit hopping away. He turned from the watermelons and chased after the rabbit into the forest. After a long time of chasing the rabbit, the monkey gave up. Now he was lost deep in the forest and had nothing. The little monkey sat at the foot of the big tree, feeling sad and frightened. Then, to his surprise, a monk sat down beside him. The monk was big and had a funny pink-coloured skin. He's probably talking about Ajahn Sumedho, but did not seem dangerous. The monkey told his new friend that he was lost. The monk said, "Don't worry, let's meditate together. When your mind has calmed down, you will think of a solution to your problem." So the monk and the monkey meditated together. After some time, the little monkey opened his eyes and smiled. He climbed the big tree, and looking down, he could see far below him the path that led all the way back home. And I think that's an absolutely wonderful story about the little monkey finding himself, being able to, by cultivating his meditation practice, calm the mind from the desires that arise in the mind. So this is a story, an analogy about how desire can upset the rhythm of our calmness, our happy minds. First he starts off, he had some peaches, and then he saw something bigger, the watermelon, and then he saw the rabbit. He's chasing after the rabbit. And it's just like a metaphor for our life. When you start off, you buy a small car, for example. I had an old Beetle at the time when I started, little Volkswagen thing, all rusty, and I used to run my business out of this Beetle. Then as I became more successful in business, I went up a notch. Then I went up a notch. Now I've got another one. It's just this continual chasing after something bigger and better. And so the point of the story is to be careful, to not let desires rule our life, which of course is the second noble truth. What's the cause of suffering? Well, it's desire in the mind, this constant craving after this and that, this lack of contentment. And we can't see the path in front of us. But the monk came to the little monkey and said, let's sit down, meditate, calm the mind, watch the breath. What's the mind doing now? And he was able to calm the mind, climb the tree, and see the path. His mind was calm. Now, desire, that's an interesting aspect of Buddhist teachings. Is there good desire or bad desire? It's often said, the final enlightenment, all desire has to go, good and bad. But up until a certain point, we need to have a wholesome desire to be able to practice. Really, when you look about it, when you think about it, you need a wholesome desire to practice. I want to get rid of the defiling thoughts in the mind. I'd like to have a better grip on my thoughts, speech, and actions. That's a desire, but it's a wholesome desire. So I would like to be a more generous person. I'm interested in climate change. This is a wholesome desire. But eventually, all desire has to go in the end, the Buddha said, because that's what's keeping us swinging through the trees on this cycle of samsara. But we need to understand this. We need to understand that we need some desire in the mind to get to no desire in the mind. It's a very Zen koan-like thing, right? So even to follow the 37 factors of enlightenment, we need some desire. We want to change and become better people so the mind can be naturally happy. like our little monkey. We want to have a smile like the little monkey. So when you go to the climate change tomorrow, watch the mind. When we day-to-day living in our life, watch the mind. See what the mind's doing. We have to have minds that are turning towards what's useful and what's not useful. And we can only do that by the practice of mindfulness. We have to become, the mind's so quick that often we miss how the mind is reacting to things. But with the cultivation of mindfulness, it slows the mind down. And so we can see more clearly and more quickly what's happening in our own minds and bodies. So we don't identify, we don't react in the same way. And then when we get to that point and there's a space in the mind, then the little monkey smile comes into the mind. The little monkey smile comes into the mind. It's those moments of quietness in the mind that Ajahn Chah is asking us to contemplate in our practice. I think something like this is how it works. So we need to create the conditions for the happy mind to arise, if you like. And the way we do that is by trying to practice mindfulness and samadhi, concentration, and generosity. We need to develop our panya, our wisdom, so we can have more moments of mindfulness, which is hard to do. But I'll talk more about that in a moment, because that'll come into the 37 Factors of Enlightenment. Am I being clear for you? You getting an idea? Yeah, good. Okay. That's why I like Ajahn Chah's teaching very much, because he talks through story. But when you listen carefully to the story, you see that there's a point he's trying to make here. And all his teaching was like that. It was great. I liked it very much indeed. Now, we'll meditate for 30 minutes. So I think that's what you do here at the association. Is that good? You're good to do that? Yeah. Now, I think if you've been coming to the association, to Bante's group for some time, you'll have the technique that Bante's been teaching you. And it's perfectly okay if you just follow whichever method you would like to practice on. My main teaching focus, as some of you will know, is more on the Mahasi side, or method of meditation, where we observe the primary object of rising and falling of the abdomen as our primary object. Sometimes the in and out breathing, but mostly concentrating on the rising and falling movement, and observing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which we will talk a little more about later. But I would just suggest that we keep things simple. Meditation is a simple activity, but it's difficult to do because of why? Because the mind moves so much, unawares to us. It moves all over the place. So the observation of the primary object, whether it's the in and out breathing, which some of you will have been doing, I'm sure, with Bante, or the rising and falling of the abdomen, try to stay as close as you can to the object of meditation. In other words, try to let your attention fall onto it, if it's the rising and falling, and observe the movement. If it's at the nostrils, just be aware of the breath coming in and coming out, and the sensation that you feel on the upper lip as the breath touches. You may not be able to feel this to begin with, but observing in and out. One of the methods, one of the techniques that Mahasi taught was this method of mental labeling. So you would say in the mind, rising, falling, concurrently connecting with the experience of the rising movement and falling movement. It helps you not float away so much to begin with. Just watch the rising as it goes, comes up and goes down again. In and out breathing, you can use in and out. Just watching just inside the nostrils, in and out with the breath. For now, I'd like to suggest that for this period of time, that's all we do. Keeping things really simple. Mind will wander, acknowledge it, come back. Sometimes different sensations will arise in the body. We can note these as well and come back to the primary object. The monkey mind might start up and you'll start thinking and planning and reflecting and getting caught up in all kinds of thoughts. Let them go for now and try to stay with the rising and falling or the in and out breathing as much as possible. But do this in a relaxed fashion. Meditation, we don't want to create tension. We're wanting to do away with tension. But we want to be attentive to the experience that we're having. We shouldn't try too hard, but we shouldn't also be lazy. Let go of the wandering thoughts. They'll be there, but we don't need to get caught up in the story about them. Just be with the primary object for this sitting. Rising and falling or in and out of the nostrils. Just think of the little monkey sitting with the monk, calming the mind, relaxing the body. think we could have gone on a lot longer with the meditation. Enough of this talking. Welcome back, Zoomies. They're still there. It's good. Okay. We've only got a little time left, so I'm just going to go through these factors of enlightenment, the wings of awakening, just briefly for you, and perhaps on another occasion we can go more into depth with them, which would be interesting, because they're really the conditions that we need to develop in our life for the little monkey smile to come. I like that term now. I use that a lot. That's great. The first one, of course, is the really important. And you've all heard this many, many times. It's the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The first in the 37 factors of enlightenment. The 4 out of all of them, they're all important. But at the heart of the Buddhist meditation or Buddhist teachings is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it's what we do and try to do as consistently as possible to cultivate and develop. And I'm sure you all know the 4 foundations of mindfulness: mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of sensations and feelings, whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, that arise either within the body or in the mind itself. And the third one is mindfulness of the mind, consciousness, and how that consciousness is colored by various mental states of unwholesomeness and wholesomeness. The moods, the emotions, etc., that touch our minds. Right? And the fourth is a whole lot of categories, but pertaining to our meditation practice. The most important ones are the hindrances to the development of practice, the 5 hindrances, which I'm sure you know, and being aware of the 6 sense doors. This story of the little monkey is all concerned here with the sense doors. It's how we function from moment to moment in our daily life. We see, we hear, we taste, we smell, we touch, we think. And through the arising of a coloration of that moment that affects consciousness is how we live our life. For example, when we hear something, if we like it, we want it. If we see something, if we don't like it, we want to push it away, etc., etc. Right down the line with all the 6 sense doors. They say sometimes in the teaching that the 4th foundation of mindfulness, which is not spoken about a lot, is really the culmination of the practice. Mahasi Sayadaw himself, he says in his instructions, he starts off in his instructions, which are very detailed on how to develop and practice mindfulness. He starts off with, be aware of the moment-to-moment arising of any of the 6 sense doors. When you hear something, see something, smell something, touch something, think about something, try to be mindful of it. That's how he starts his instructions. He goes on then to say, but because of the discursive thinking mind, the wandering mind, it's difficult to do that. So we need to have a primary object where we can develop the teamwork of concentration, which is the ability to stay on an object, and mindfulness, which is the ability to recognize what that is that's arising for us, and also to remember when we're not being mindful. So mindfulness means recognition and remembering, recognizing what's in the mind, what's when we've become conscious of an experience in the body or in the mind. and remembering when we're not being mindful of the present moment experience and come back to it. For example, you're observing the rising and falling, in and out breathing. Maybe it can last for one breath, one rising, and the mind wanders off. Is that the case? And you have to remember, oh, I've gone off. Right? Thoughts, wanderings, imaginations, etc., etc. Well, that's the third foundation of mindfulness. And you note it. You say, oh, the mind's gone off. And you come back again to the rising and falling. That's how it works. So recognition and remembering is really the definition of mindfulness, and paying attention, which is the most common usage of the word mindfulness, is correct, but there's more to it than that. So the four foundations of mindfulness are really the core, satipatthana, in Pali, satipatthana. The whole method is called satipatthana, vipassana, bhavana. Satipatthana is the close attention to what we're experiencing within us and without, and externally, internally and externally. Satipatthana is a close observation, and bhavana is the cultivation of attention carefully and closely onto the object of meditation. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's really the heart of the Buddhist meditation, really. So I would encourage you to try the best you can to be mindful of the body, the activities of the body, and be mindful of the sensations that you're experiencing, feelings you're experiencing, be mindful of the emotions, the moods as they come up, but just with a bare attention. The trick or the secret is to watch the movements of the mind without identification, with I. But just to watch the flow of experience as it comes and goes. People think that when we're practicing meditation, we want to put a stop to things, but we don't. We want to watch what's happening, and in so doing, they will stop. We want to be aware when negative conditions are in the mind. Exactly I mean here by anger, frustration, jealousy. But we don't want to say to ourselves, oh, I'm a terrible person. We just want to watch the flow. If you take off the fire, then it's going to dissolve. You will start to see the dissolution, the anicca of these moods and conditions that arise in the mind. So the four foundations of mindfulness, the four right, that's satipatthana, the four right efforts. Now, we're not going to have time for all this, are we? Because I rattled on before. It says here, there's this great, I've got this thing, they're called Dharma lists. Buddhism, as you know, loves lists. You know, there's so many things, list, you know. And you know, at the end of Mahasi's instruction, this is pertaining to lists, he goes on for page after page, how to be mindful, right? Of every little thing that you're experiencing. And when you go to a Mahasi center, you're trained in this way. You know, you're trained to be aware of getting up, getting down, putting your clothes on, brushing your teeth, eating your food. You know, you're trained to see without identifying. So sort of noticing when the desire comes in. You hear a sound, you're trained to just note the process of hearing. It's really complicated. Very detailed in the beginning till the concentration builds up. But then he goes on to say, right at the end of his instructions, he says, oh, but just keep it simple and just watch the rising and falling. And when I got to that part, I went, I can relax now. Which is why I'm very much into relaxation, because especially the foreigners that go to the centres, and the Burmese people would be cruising along. They're very disciplined, but in a much more cruisy fashion. We're all us foreigners that go there, and we try to walk really slowly and eat really slowly and, you know, try to be good yogis. The Burmese are just cruise through the day, hour sitting, hour walking, hour sitting, hour walking. Yeah. And they were much more successful than we were. And then you see all the Westerners starting to get a bit grumpy and they'd be freaking out and getting too much tension. And, you know, so that's why I was trying to intimate tonight too. Watch but relax. Be alert but relax. And not tie yourself up in knots with it all. So the 4 right efforts. Not to let an unwholesome, unskillful thought arise. That's a good one. Not to let an unwholesome, unskillful thought arise. And that's mindfulness. As soon as we can catch in the mind, here comes charging into the mind an unwholesome thought, right? And we just have to have bare attention and we watch it. So that's right effort. You know, watching the unwholesome thought, because we have many unwholesome thoughts during the day. Well, I don't know, maybe you don't, but I know I do. And I got to watch those, well, I don't know, some at least, come into my mind. I go, oh, there's an unwholesome thought. Watch that, right? Don't get caught up in it. Just watch it, you know, and see it. It'll come and go, because why? Everything passes, everything changes, anicca. If we get caught in it, we'll start making a story about it. And it'll go on and on and on and create conditions for unhappiness to arise in the mind. So that's right effort. Thoughts arise, which is not to let an unwholesome, unskillful thought arise, which has not yet arisen. And this is the guarding factor of the mind. So you're there, even though it hasn't even arisen, you're guarding the mind to not let it come in. You know, so mindfulness is often referred to as the guard at the gate. You know, watching who's coming and going. So not yet arisen. Not to let an unwholesome, unskillful thought continue, which has already arisen. As I was talking about just a moment ago, we don't want to let these unwholesome thoughts that come into the mind continue, because they create chaos in the mind. They certainly take away from the happy mind, don't they? You know, our little monkey mind doesn't smile. You know, it gets caught up. So we want to abandon them. We want to let them go. To make a wholesome, skillful thought arise, which has not yet arisen, and that's development. And this is where I'm talking about the good things that we can do with our thoughts, speech, and actions. Like you're going to the climate change tomorrow. Very good. You know, I talked about the Burmese and their development, and also in Australia. I'm just pinpointing the Burmese because I spend a lot of time there. Their generosity. You know, if you can change a selfish thought into a generous thought, oh, it's going to have all kinds of implications to increase the happiness in the mind. You know, because we feel happy. We've made a condition or caused a condition to arise which is going to bring about happiness in the mind. When we do something generous, doesn't it feel nice? You know, we know we've done something nice for ourselves and we've done something nice for somebody else. And so easier to meditate. Concentration's easier. We get all kinds of conditions can come from just a simple act of generosity. You know, that's what it means here, right effort. To make an unwholesome, skillful thought continue, which has already arisen, and that's called sustaining effort. Right, so for example, you might be going to the climate change tomorrow. You've had this thought some weeks ago, started to organize, get involved in it. You know, one of the greatest things we have to stop. We're going to have to continue on some other point, right? It's 9 o'clock. What was I going to say? One of the things I really learned And I think this is really strong now in Australia. It's become much, much stronger than when I first came back from Asia, is Dharma service. You're offering service to Dharma. And I was really drilled in this one. I'm not drilled in the sense that but I just picked up on what people were doing. And so my aim when I came back to Australia a long time ago now was to do something good for the Dharma. Was to start meditation centers, was to bring teachers here, and I've been doing that like forever now. And I'm forever grateful for what I learned about how doing things like that and continuing with the wholesome thoughts, wholesome actions really help and helps with the meditation practice, because the mind's not tied up in selfishness. Let's let go of individuality or identity in some sense to get things for yourself. And so it's a lot easier to meditate, because you're not thinking about other things. So the 4 efforts. Now I'm just going to go through these we'll have to get into this more. Where am I? I've lost my way.
Would you like to come back, Graham?
Yeah, we can come back because we've only touched on 2. That's not enough, is it?
You have to come back.
I will, I'll come back. We'll do it. The 4 bases of power, the 5 faculties, the 5 strengths, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the noble eightfold path. So with the 37 factors of enlightenment, or the wings of awakening, we have just to reiterate, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the heart of the practice, the 4 right efforts to abandon what's not useful and cultivate what's useful, the 4 bases of power, which we won't go into, 5 faculties, the 5 strengths, 7 factors of enlightenment, and the noble eightfold path. Continue next week. So, I hope you've enjoyed the night. I've enjoyed being here. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. We didn't get very far, did we? Anyway, never mind. We'll get there.
Thank you, Graham, for the teaching.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mary. That's for inviting me. Yeah, it was
You'll
great.
come back in a couple of weeks' time.
We'll see. Yeah. Of course. If you start at 7 o'clock.
And finish at 11.
Yeah, we could, I know, I used to hate it. When like some of these Sayadaws and Ajahns, man, they could go on for hours. And you'd have to sit there like a good little yogi, listening to them. 1 hour, 2 hours. Oh, when's Bhante going to stop? And then suddenly you'd fall into this meditative state, which could have been sleep, really. But you kind of said to yourself, oh, that's a nice meditation tonight. You're actually asleep, I think. But they go on forever. Yeah, I've turned into one of them. All right.
All right, just let's
Thank
pay
you.
respect.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sukhi Hontu. May you be happy and peaceful. May we all live with the Dharma and have happy minds.